What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Apogee Fitness Podcast, coming to you from the Apogee Therapy Center recording studio. My name is David Carter.
And I'm Kevin Harrington.
Kevin, you've been busy lately.
I've been shooting a bunch of concerts. It's concert season again.
So where are these concerts at?
Usually I shoot them up in Asheville. Just depends on where they send me. So it's fun. You know, right now I'm the house photographer for Harris Cherokee Center in Asheville.
And I saw you just shot The Who.
The Who, that's kind of funny. It's the Mongolian Who.
The Mongolian Who. I was wondering about that.
I've actually seen the Who before, but
yeah,
now I've seen the Mongolian Who.
Perfect. So what makes them Mongolian?
They are they're actually a chanting. They do throat singing.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, if you've never, it's traditional Mongolian folk music, and they were opening up for Hellstrom. So they have an album. They've actually done they did one of the songs for Star Wars Fallen Order.
Well, they fit in right at home in Asheville then, I'm sure.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I was impressed by it. It really was good. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, you want to introduce today's guest?
Well, I guess we will.
I guess we'll get there.
Today, we have the other half of Talking Elite Fitness, Tommy Marquez. Tommy, how you doing?
I am doing great, guys. It is Thursday. NFL season's about to start. Sun is shining. Not much to complain about.
That's right, man. Football is back. Tommy, I feel like I just got done talking to you because I was just listening to your podcast on the way here.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the one that you literally just dropped probably about an hour ago.
Yep, that was probably filmed about 3 hours ago. So
Perfect. So, do you have a fantasy team lined up for this weekend?
I do. I have two fantasy teams. I have a pick'em league and I have a suicide pick'em league. What do we call it? It's Survivor Pool.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. You're all in then.
Yeah.
You got money on any of these leagues?
I do. On all of them, basically.
Good for you, man. Good for you. I went through a phase, man. I had to give it up like 5 years ago. If I was ever addicted to anything, it would have been fantasy football.
I did fantasy football and I did fantasy hockey.
It was bad. Oh, that's even worse.
Dude, I like hockey.
That's a lot of work. Football is a lot of work. I was to the point where I was up at like 2 or 3 in the morning fixing my roster.
I actually won
trade
twice,
deadlines.
though.
It was bad. Lots of money involved. I had to give it up. But this year I did say yes to a free league, so I'm back in.
Nice.
Good for you.
Yeah, man. All right, so Tommy, you're wearing the Cowboys jersey. I know from being an avid listener to your podcast, one of the very known facts about you is that you are a Dallas Cowboys fan. My first question for you, growing up in California with, the likes of the Oakland Raiders and the Chargers and the San Francisco 49ers and all those California teams to choose from, how did you land the Cowboys?
Well, my father, who I inherited all my sports teams from, is from a town called Bayard, New Mexico. Most people who are listening probably have never heard of that town, and I wouldn't blame them for it. It is a town in the middle of nowhere, southwestern New Mexico. And the one thing that's unique about New Mexico is outside of the Albuquerque Isotopes AAA baseball team, there aren't any professional sports teams there. So my dad just kind of like went with the teams and players that he like gravitated towards. So back when my father was growing up, Roger Staubach, Tom Landry, America's team, the Dallas Cowboys was the team that he really liked. And it's funny enough, the other half, like my uncles ended up liking the other half of that equation, which was the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, no.
So we have kind of a house divided on my dad's side. But then on top of that, when my dad was, a big Jerry West fan, and so he naturally, fell for the Lakers. And then he was a big pitcher in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And all of his favorite pitchers were on the Oakland A's back in the day.
Raleigh Fingers.
Like the 70s and 80s, like powerhouse Oakland A's teams. And those are the athletes that he gravitated towards. So naturally, I got a hodgepodge of all three.
That's nice, dude.
That's awesome.
Well, we're from South Carolina, so there are folks here who are all over the board with what team they follow since we don't really have a team here.
Well, it used to be the Carolina Panthers because they played at Clemson when they first got here.
Really?
Yeah, they played in the Clemson Stadium.
I did not know that.
Yep. They played.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's come to my attention that in one area of the country, the word Clemson has a P on it.
Clemson, yes.
Where did that come from? I've heard people refer to it as Clemson.
Well, a lot of people like it's.
he grew up right outside of Clemson.
I literally lived 20 minutes. My grandparents used to work there. It's Clemson. It's just we say it fast, and then so that's where the P comes in. It's like Clemson. You don't think about it, and then but some people will be like Clemson, which I don't ever hear that. So it's funny when you said it because you tried to say it, but if you just let it roll off your tongue, Clemson, you'll hear the P. It just kind of sort of comes.
Yeah,
I got corrected once or twice for saying it incorrectly, like not having enough,
How did you say it?
I remember exactly how you said it. You said Clemson.
I just said Clemson.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, I remember that. That's hilarious. So, do you have a college football team?
Not particularly. I generally root for all the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went to a lot of Stanford games growing up. A good friend of mine went to Stanford. I had friends that go to UCLA. Generally speaking, like the West Coast college football scene is such that like let's just get a Pac-12 team into the BCS or into the playoff system now. So like I didn't have a hardcore team. My university didn't have a football team, so I didn't get that luxury. So I generally rooted for the Pac-12 anytime they would go cross conference.
Cool. Yeah.
You played lacrosse in college.
I did.
You did. Yeah. What was that kind of like? I mean, we've never had a lacrosse player on. I mean,
well, I'd never played before college, so and I originally was going to play one of two sports, either basketball or football was my goal to play in college, and then went to Santa Clara, wanted to play basketball. That ended up not working out, and I just decided to, after putting on a little bit of weight, put on the freshman 35.
Yeah, buddy.
Decided to get back out on the track and lifting and running and getting into a fitness routine. And got the lacrosse coach saw me out at the track and was like, hey, you ever be interested in playing lacrosse? And I kind of, was curious. And so I kind of inquired a little bit further and gave it a try. And some guys in my dorm were like, yeah, man, you're a good athlete. You should come do it. We'll turn you into a lacrosse player. And none of the high schools in my area had lacrosse at the time, so I had no chance to play it. And then coach taught me how to catch and throw, and I already knew how to hit people and play defense. So it was kind of a natural fit, and I fell in love with it from there.
That's awesome, dude.
We're getting lacrosse out here in the Southeast.
It's definitely blowing up down here. There's a lot of people from the Northeast moving to the Southeast. So
my friend's daughter plays in high school, and the women's rules are very different from men's rules.
They are.
Yeah.
All right, so Tommy, we're interested. The audience, knows you a lot from CrossFit, announcing CrossFit, from your podcast, from reading your articles on Morning Chalk Up. But outside of CrossFit, and then the tad bits that you throw here and there about being a Dallas Cowboys fan and stuff like that, we want to know a little bit more about you. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, what kind of family life you had growing up, and we know you played lacrosse now in college, but what did you play growing up with sports? It sounds like sports was always a big part of your life.
Yeah, no doubt. So I was born in Monterey, California, raised in Salinas, which is a city 15 miles away. So everyone knows Monterey because it's like right where like Pebble Beach and all the golf courses are. There's a ton of like big car races and car shows and a lot of tourist stuff there. Salinas is the lesser known like farm town. It's about 15 miles inland. Call it Steinbeck country because the author John Steinbeck was from there. But sports was a massive part of my upbringing. My dad's we almost kind of like use the term like lifelong athlete. Like we just like playing and competing in things and playing sports and being active in outdoors. And my dad was the kind of person that grew up playing every sport, was always active, always physically active. And so he imparted that very early on with me and just playing sports and encouraged me to go outside and play and play sports in the neighborhood and do all of those different things physically, while my mom was more of, I would say, the artistic side of things. My parents were very different in a lot of ways, but also very similar in their ability, I would say, in their ability to have a good time
Sure.
and blend into a party.
Good.
My mom was like theater, well read, like dance and all of like the arts side of things. But both of them came from like lower class to lower middle class families. So my mom was an Army brat. There's a military base, and now decommissioned military base nearby where I'm at called Fort Ord. It's right in between Salinas and Monterey. And my dad was stationed there in the Army because he basically used the Army as a way to get out of his hometown in his area in New Mexico. My mom was stationed there because my grandpa was there. My parents ended up meeting in that area of the world, and that's how my family got particularly to California. And so I was kind of, I would say, raised in I would say more of a blue collar, maybe not necessarily rich in money, but rich in like experience and family and things like that. Because both of my parents are the youngest of 5. We have pretty big families on both sides. Everyone is pretty well on good terms, and there's always family squabbles and stuff like that.
Sure.
So I feel like I got a general rich sense of like family and community and like the home, but also was encouraged to explore and create and do all of these things, whether it was sports or whether it was reading in school, and I got a nice balance of that from both my parents. Sports was probably what I naturally gravitated to most. In that regard, so I played soccer, football, basketball, baseball. I wrestled. I ran track. The kind of running joke, like for me and my dad, is that like we would compete in tiddlywinks if it were a neighborhood competition. Like
Sure.
that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So we have that competitive nature in us. I have a younger brother that's 8.5 years younger than me, and he's very similar to me in some ways, but I think he maybe skews a little bit more towards the artistic side on my mom's side. I felt like overall, I got a really good sense of family, of activity, and support from that, because even though like my parents weren't born with much, they were really, really hard workers. So I was very I'll say this time and time again, I am one of the most fortunate people on the planet that I was modeled. I was given a good family model, a good work ethic model, and generally a well-balanced perspective on activity and arts and things like that from both my parents. And I'm, extremely grateful for that. So I think that kind of painted me to be able to explore and pursue basically whatever I wanted. And I really went after sports for a long time because I just absolutely loved it.
There was a couple of photos that I was looking over your Facebook, getting the whole Tommy Marquez dossier going.
Oh, there you go.
You got the whole, you were a little kid and your mom dressed you up as Mickey Mouse with the whole suit, the tie, the whole thing. And she's got the dress on. And then there's another picture where you're with your like little girlfriend or whatever. You guys went out that Halloween for Mickey Mouse. And then there's a photo of your dad and your brother when you were like little kids, but then you guys did the recreation photo. So I mean,
wait, say that last part. I lost you.
There's a photo that you have on Facebook. It's like the recreation of where you 3 were sitting on the couch, and your dad was your little brother was in the middle drinking the thing. So it really shows that there's a close family bond there. So
yeah, I think there's some like I'm very fortunate. So my dad's side's my last name's Marquez. My dad's Mexican. Comes from the Southwest. My mom is half, and then the other half is from the South. And two of the cultural elements I think that really shone through from that regard is in the absence of physical possessions, like familial possession is a very enriching part of the life. So like the Hispanic family like unit is very like tight knit. I think even some like the Southern family unit of like looking after your own is very important. And I got two sides of that same coin from different cultures. And I think that was something that my parents really like drove home as well. And so I'm glad that at least came through in some regard, because I do hold my family's like so near and dear, and it's such a huge element of who I am.
I also would agree that your dad does look like Carlos Santana.
Dude,
it looks just like him. When I saw the photo, I was like, he could play Carlos Santana in a biographic movie. I mean, that's great.
That's amazing. You should reach out.
Yep.
So you in high school you played basketball, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you said going into college you wanted to play either basketball or did you play football in high school?
Yeah. So in high school I played football, basketball, and ran track.
Okay.
I wanted to wrestle too, but that was during basketball season, and they made me. I did both sports simultaneously in middle school, and then they made me choose one. I chose basketball. I actually originally just wanted to play basketball. Like most of high school, like basketball was probably my sport.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a really successful senior year of football. Our team won our equivalent of state. We gave a good run at the number one team in the country, De La Salle, back that year, and we had what was considered the best team in the history of our county that I got to play a part of. I was lucky to go to an all boys private Catholic school called Palmer High School.
Okay.
Small school in town, and it was basically where you went if you wanted to play sports. And I was fortunate to get a scholarship there and get some financial assistance. And my parents worked really hard to put me and my brother both through there. And after the success of senior year, I had an opportunity to maybe play football too. Some like D1 AA schools, maybe walk on at a lower to mid tier like D1 school, but ended up trying to go play basketball. But I played them both.
Cool. Was there any type of recruiting process for you as far as or were you kind of at the time, I guess you're my age, so we weren't really getting recruited via online. It was more like here's some tape kind of thing. Did you go through that process? Yeah,
a little bit. So it was before like the huddle and where you could like kind of like cut up all your highlights and stuff like that. I remember for basketball, I got invited before my senior year, the summer before my senior year, to go play junior nationals on a California team. And I got some interest from coaches there, some schools on the West Coast that were like D2, D3, D1 AA that were like, hey, like we'd love to maybe have you come out and check us out. None of those schools immediately jumped off the paper to me that I necessarily just wanted to go to, because I was also going to be one of the first handful of people in my family to go to a 4-year university. Awesome. So that was also in the back of my mind about like, okay, well, where can I get a really good education, and where can I go to a place where, in my opinion, the value of college beyond just education is the ability to break you outside of your bubble and expose you to new and interesting environments that could, spur creativity. And so I was trying to take that into account too. And then all of a sudden, like senior year we blew up in football, and I had a really good postseason, and I had a really big play my senior year that helped us win the title. So I started getting interest, like late interest, because that was already really late in the season, for a lot of schools to be like, hey, we can't offer you a scholarship, but you have a spot on the team. Would you like to walk on? One school that was Division III, I believe, offered me to play football and basketball. And so it was kind of a weird, non-traditional process, because everything happened really late for me. Like sure. I've been the same height since I was like 8th grade. I'm like 6'3", but I filled out really, really late. I didn't get like the college worthy like weight and size behind me outside of my lankiness until I was a senior. So I got some light recruitment and some options, and some junior colleges reached out and wanted me to come play for 2 years there. So it was kind of a mixed bag. And ultimately I decided to try and walk on at Santa Clara and give it a go to go play basketball there. Cause they played in a league with like Gonzaga and some of the big like West Coast Cinderella teams that I really wanted to like potentially play against.
That's awesome. All right. So I do know, again, from listening to your podcast, that you were a psych major. Is that correct in college? Is that something that you knew going into college you wanted to major in, or was that something that you decided after like freshman year or something?
It was something that I decided the middle of my sophomore year. Originally went to be what was called a combined sciences major, so it's pre-med basically for what Santa Clara was, and I was convinced that that's what was I wanted to do because I think especially in like sometimes the initial instinct from families that maybe don't, maybe aren't as well educated, like the instinct from the broader family circles is like, oh, you got a chance, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, something like that's like those are like the ideal jobs, right? And so I got a lot of family being like, oh, you're gonna go be a doctor, you're gonna go be a doctor, you're gonna go be a doctor.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go be a doctor.
Yep.
And then I showed up and took the first round of science classes that were required, and then I got to organic chemistry, and I was like,
the weeder outer classes. Yep.
I
know all about those.
I was like, I hate this class, and
Yeah.
I had a couple like really like really difficult classes that I would say just the experience left a bad taste in my mouth in terms of just like the interaction with my peers and my teacher. And so I was like, I know I want to help people, and I know I want to be involved in the sciences to some regard. The business side of like the business element, like Santa Clara has a great business school because they're right in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that just doesn't appeal to me really. I like history, so maybe that, but it was kind of late to like get into that. And so I took a psych class on a whim, just because it seemed interesting. And it was like an introductory in history of clinical psychology. And I was like smitten by it. And I realized that like, hey, maybe the focus needs to be from like the neck up versus the neck down. And that was kind of what I kind of had one of those light bulb moments in the class. I'm like, man, I'm really engaged here. I'm really enjoying. I'm looking forward to the projects and the tests and things like that. And maybe this is what I need to pursue. And I kept going down that rabbit hole, and sure enough, it was what I ended up studying, getting my degree in.
So what did you do with the degree once you got out of college?
So I got done, and I got a job at a nonprofit in my hometown, just out in the suburbs of my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
It was a foster and adoption care agency that also provided the full spectrum of mental health services to any of the clients and family members of the people that came through the system. So I think we were Medi-Cal billing, so we were public social services type funding, lower socioeconomic status in my hometown, which is primarily the demographic I wanted to work with at the time. Coming from a farm town in California, we have a lot of migrant farm worker. As far as like the demographic that kind of powers the blue collar element of it, and I felt like that's a population I wanted to serve, being kind of like a mixed race, like Hispanic kid getting more of a white collar education and having some opportunities that never everyone did. I wanted to kind of go back and give back a little bit. And so I worked primarily with school-age children. I was what was called a rehabilitation specialist. So I was an extension of therapy in the field, in the troublesome areas for our kids. So if our kid, a kid he generally had incidents or issues around school time or interacting with his peers in sports or at home, in developing a therapeutic plan with the clinical psychologist or the psychiatrist or the marriage and family therapist, I would help execute that plan in those locations, so outside of the clinic or in the controlled environment, if you will. And so that's what I did for a few years, and that's actually how I've ended up finding CrossFit.
I have a question about that before we get into CrossFit. So working in an environment like that and working with children in an environment like that, were parents involved a lot in that, or was it kind of hard to work with the parents and get them to understand what you were trying to do with their children to progress their children?
So a lot of times I would say less than 5% I was working with actual biological parents. Mm-hmm. So because it was a foster and adoption care agency, I was primarily working with foster parents, with adoptive parents. Usually they were relative caregiver situations. So an aunt, an uncle, a grandma that had taken over the primary parental role for the kids. And so it was It was tough because a lot of times, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a picture or too broad of a brush. Some of the issues, like holistically, that plague the family or are systemic at times. So a lot of times I'm working with people that are products of that same environment.
Right.
So it's very difficult to very difficult to
break
get
the cycle.
Yeah, it is a vicious cycle, and it's tough getting people on board who they themselves also have things that they need to work out as well.
Right.
And so it's tough to, I would say it's tough to sometimes like actually get your hooks in,
right,
as far as like making sure that everyone is on board and understands the necessity of the situation.
So you say you found CrossFit through that. Tell us a little bit of how that happened, how that came to be.
Say it again. Sorry, you cut out.
So you say you found CrossFit through this opportunity. How did that work out? I mean, obviously it worked out well, but I'm saying, how did that come to be?
So I was, obviously the nature of working with kids, lower socioeconomic status. I mean, a lot of these kids were dealt really bad hands, and as you start to get further into it, sometimes you get some cases that just rock you. I had a couple of cases where the circumstances around the kids' lives before I got to work with them were just absolutely heartbreaking and appalling, like the worst possible things. I mean, I would not have ever imagined some of the scenarios could exist in humanity with some of the things that I saw had happened to those children, like the worst of the worst. And that kind of shook my world a little bit and kind of put me on my heels. And as a result, emotionally, it started to take its toll. And I needed an outlet to be able to, I don't know, fill my cup up a little bit more, do something for myself, for my own physical and mental health. And I was always been active in sports and things like that. And at the time, I wasn't doing any of that. I'd stopped playing sports. I was more focused on work. I was spending some time at home. I was living with my parents, so I was at home, getting to spend quality time with my family. But I didn't have a physical outlet. I didn't have something that was my own, outside of like trying to go out on the weekends and spend time with my buddies at the bar, which is going to burn the candle from both ends at some point. And
sure.
And so my best friend grew up across the highway from the ranch in Aromas, and like the ranch in Aromas literally sits off, like you could hit a golf ball to Highway 101, one of the biggest highways in California. And exactly on the other side of it is a little turnoff road to a side road in Aromas that my best friend grew up on, and I actually grew up working on that farm. And so his cousin lost 100 pounds doing CrossFit. His cousin also went to high school with the Castros. And so his cousin was like, yo, I know these crazy Mexican guys from high school. They're doing this thing called CrossFit. I lost 100 pounds. He looked great. He got like, my buddy's cousin got like the fear of God speech from his doctor, basically.
Yep.
And so that's what got him on track. And then he had such success. He was like, I know two young guys that are willing to like dive into this wholeheartedly. So my buddy came to me, he's like, yeah, we got to try this. I went earlier this week and I've gone a couple times. You got to do it. So I drove out. It's about 15 minutes outside of my town. And I drove out, pulled off up to this shed on the hillside, and just saw these people doing pull-ups and push-ups and lifting barbells and running up this crazy hillside. And I remember thinking like, well, this is definitely something, like I'll give it a go. And then the minute they were like, oh yeah, and we do these for time too, so you can like measure and compete against yourself and friendly competition against some people. And as soon as that happened, like the hair on the back of my neck went up, and I was like, oh yeah,
the bells were ringing, man.
yeah
They're calling you.
It got kind of like the juice flowing a little bit, and I got into a crazy like race at the end of it. The workout, it was 10 rounds of 5 push press, 5 burpee box jumps, and you cap out with a 750 row. And me and my best friend got to the row at the exact same time.
Wow.
And we kind of looked at each other, and I always joke it was like the scene from end of the first Fast and the Furious when he pulls up next to Vin Diesel, and Vin Diesel's like, when that light's green, I'm going.
Right.
And that's what it was. And as soon as I got done, I felt so fulfilled in the work that I had done. And there was like that rush of like having like physically done work that I was like, you know what, this is like, I'll be back. Tell me what this was. And he was like, oh, it was CrossFit. And Dave Castro's older brother handed me a beer and like hosed me off and was like, yeah, this is CrossFit. Welcome.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
I've got 2 or 3 questions right now. So first question, who won that row right there? You or your buddy?
I think I got him by like 10 meters.
Good
I think
for
I
you.
literally like shouted time. He shouted time. I fell out of the rower but didn't unclip my feet. I was like swarming with my feet still strapped in, just like hating life. And my friend was like cursing me out that I like barely edged him out.
Nice. All right. So prior to walking into the ranch, had you been working out at all, or was it just beers and whiskey?
We had probably a few months, probably 6 months prior, we had done a cycle of P90X, and then had been like loosely going to the gym, and I was playing some pickup hoops at the time. And so I thought I was in shape. Yeah. Like I thought I was like, yeah, I finished this cycle like P90X. Like,
yeah, I got that. I'm doing that ab ripper every night.
Oh yeah. And I got wrecked.
Yeah. Okay. What year was this?
This was end of 2008, early 2009. I believe it's early 2009.
10 rounds, a burpee box jump, push press, and the cash out 7.
How heavy was the push press?
Yeah.
I want to say like 95.
Okay.
Which at the time was like decent, you know.
Yeah,
sure.
Sure.
It's 2009.
Awesome. All right. So you worked out, you came back, you kept working out.
How did you feel the next day?
That's a good question.
Wait, say that again?
How did you feel the next day?
What's crazy is like I remember the feeling of, and pardon my French, but I just call it the titty bridge, like this the midpoint between the nipple and the shoulder point.
Right.
Like that area right there was so sore, and I was like, I didn't bench press, I didn't do anything like that crazy. Like, why am I so sore? And that was pretty much was like, all right, if I can get like a pump like that, from like what was like five reps at a time, was awesome. And I felt decently enough engine wise. I think I've always had a good lung capacity, but like my muscles and everything else were like, so like, what the heck happened to me, that I was like, all right, I need to keep doing this.
So you basically went in and RX'd your first workout. That's amazing.
Well, RX probably wasn't even a thing back then.
Probably not.
It was just that was what it was, you know.
I think at the time it was just like, you know, here's the workout. If you can do it this way, cool. If not, change it.
Yeah.
You know.
Nice.
So, from starting to work out, were you primarily just working out at the ranch then? And how long did that last until you started going to an
I
affiliate?
worked out at the ranch for about a year. A year steady at the ranch. It was kind of like a low-key affiliate at the time. It wasn't like a big blasted publicly forward-facing affiliate because it was the home of the games, and it was like a little bit more rural, and I think they kind of wanted to keep it that way. But I would train there every day for about a year, and then in the spring of 2010, I was kind of going through this weird shift of like not really kind of getting burnt out at my job, and at that same opportunities, I was looking around, and I had the opportunity to go get my level 1. So more people were coming into the ranch to work out. Dave's older brother Kenny was like, hey, like I could use a hand doing some of the training stuff after, especially because Kenny had a kid too, and he's like, if I want to go see my son's like baseball game or something like that, like I could use the help. So we'll send you to go get like your L1. And after I did that and started training a little bit, there was no affiliates in my hometown. My hometown is, depending on who you talk to, anywhere between 190 to 300,000 people. Wow. And that fluctuates with the season, you know, with the migrant farm work. And I felt like at the time it was big enough to at least have one affiliate. And so we kind of talked about opening up affiliate in my hometown, and, you know, I had me and Kenny as kind of leaders of that. And so I think April of 2010 is when we opened our doors.
So I did a little bit of research.
But I should say, at that same time, I like decided like I wanted to take a break from working in mental health services. So,
Yeah.
So
and
you
I saw this as another opportunity to help people in a different way.
Gotcha.
So I did a little bit of research. You got your level 1 cert. The date on it is April the 7th of 2010. Your original
What was
cert.
that?
Your original level 1 cert. It's I did research on it. You got it on April the 7th of 2010. So when you say they sent you, what was it like? I mean, I got my level cert in, I want to say 2016. What was it like back then to get it in 2010?
So I was very fortunate. I got a really cool level 1 experience.
Mm-hmm.
So my level 1 was done at the Yosemite Park Ranger Station, at like the mouth of the the national park, which was amazing.
Hey,
Pat Sherwood, Miranda Oldroyd, or Miranda Alcaraz now,
Mm-hmm.
Oldroyd then, and then Lisa Ray were my 3 level 1 instructors. I don't think it was all. I think they've like refined the level 1 over time and continued to add things, but I think it was the information was still really good. It was, I remember each day we'd go through a series of different lectures. I think I was actually one of the first cohort groups to take the written test at the end. So I remember taking the written test and them telling us that we're one of the first level 1s globally to take the written test for the level 1 at the end. And we still did Fran at the end of the first day. We did a med ball burpee workout in the middle of the second day. We did squat therapy, and a few other like drills and things like that on top of the traditional like movement instruction, muscle up, stuff like that. So I think the core of what it was back then is still very similar today. I think they've fine-tuned elements of each lecture, the what is fitness, the nutrition lecture, the 9 fundamental movements and things like that. Some minor details might be different, but I think for the most part, because I remember I've gone back and since re-upped it, a lot of it, like the meat of it was still very, very similar.
So was it 3 days back then, or was it more than 3 days? Because now it's like 3 days. It's like over a weekend.
Yeah. I want to say mine was 2 days that year. Yeah. I want to say it was 2 days.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. That was 11 years ago.
Yeah. Like
It was a long time. I remember I remember watching, because in between at lunchtime, Miranda and Pat and Lisa were all training for the games that year. There was sectionals and there was regionals, and in 2009 Pat had qualified for the games, so he was one of like the returning games athletes trying to make it back again. And I remember watching them like snatch and do pull-ups and ring dips at lunch and being like, man, I want to like do that one day.
That's
Like I
awesome.
want to be able to move like that. Actually like finally had butterfly pull-ups click when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing them and like feeling exhausted during the workout, and then looking up, and I think it's Angel Falls, or one of the waterfalls that sits near the mouth of the park near the ranger station, and seeing that and being like, you know what? A lot of people don't stare at something nearly as nice when they do Fran, so I better shut up.
That's amazing. Hey, that's a good time for it to click
awesome.
during Fran. That's for sure. I haven't done Fran in forever. When you said that, I was like, man, I should do that. Fran. I don't know if I will, but I should.
Our
See where my
workout
Fran
was not
time is.
Fran.
See if it's the same as it was 5 years ago. So it's interesting. I was gonna ask you this question later. I didn't realize. I mean, I guess I knew that you ran a CrossFit affiliate. So it's kind of a 2-part question. You've done this twice in your life. Then you've gone from corporate America to basically being an entrepreneur. Talk about going from the first time going from corporate America to opening up an affiliate, and that being sounds like your primary source of income, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenges that went with that.
It was a little bit scary at first. I would say the first time wasn't as much because I felt I had like so much conviction around what I was doing was the right thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think like seeing now reflecting what 12 years later, and that like I'm still involved in doing this on a daily basis, like knowing what that like early conviction was, like that it was in my gut and in my heart at the time. I think it made the gravity of the situation and leaving what is my degreed profession less scary, or less of like hey, I have some doubts. Granted, I was also 24 at the time, so
right. Nothing scary at that point.
No, I was like right in the that sweet spot where like hubris and confidence is at an all-time high, but experience and wisdom is at an all-time low.
Right.
And so I think that like in many ways, like it was like ignorance is kind of bliss. And I just like genuinely loved it. So it wasn't that like getting up and going to the gym every day and coaching people and working with people and building relationships. Like that's what I like to do anyways. And in many ways I think that made sense given me gravitating towards mental health services and a human, like a human social science. But yeah, the interesting part is that like even though we weren't like wildly successful, I think we were a little bit before our time in Salinas as far as like being ready for my hometown, being ready for like something like a CrossFit gym. We created enough relationships for me in that moment that like made it worthwhile overall, and made it worthwhile to like basically like empty out my savings and put all that money and time into the gym without getting a whole ton in return. It's funny, I was telling Sean today that like the affiliate playbook that just came out, like I would have loved that.
I could tell. I like I said, I was just listening to that episode, and you were very passionate about it. I haven't read it yet, obviously, but it sounds like it's an awesome tool for these affiliates, and like you said, it's for free, so why not take advantage of it?
Like I'm a big nerd. Like when I'm passionate about something, I like nerd out on it a ton. And I was so like the passion is definitely the same, but the level is still high. But it's been refined a little bit as far as like my passion for CrossFit, the sport, and all the things that come with it. But it was like such unbridled passion at the time when I was younger that I just would have chewed through those 159 pages, and I would have like read it front and back. I would have figured out everything out in between, and I think that just would have been a solid backbone for me to have at 24 years old, trying to start a business. And I think it's I look back on it with fondness, and I look back at it as a learning experience about myself, about like being able to bet on myself and change course and having it work out.
Right.
Yeah.
But you say you gave up on your psychology degree. I would actually beg to differ. I mean, you're just transforming it over to CrossFit and the mentality of your athletes that are coming in. You can kind of sort of talk to them on a better level than most average CrossFit coaches at the time, or even now, because you're looking at them and you're like, you're going to be fine. You have somebody come in like, I can't do this or whatever, and you have the mentality, you have the degree, you know how to talk to them and be able to be like, hey, we'll get there, those kind of things. So, I mean, I wouldn't say you gave up on your degree. You just changed the way you use it.
That's a good point. And I would, hearing you say that, I would definitely agree. It definitely gave me an element of being able to apply like the mindset practice and the mindset approach to sports and physically with challenge. And it's an interesting, I don't want to use the term lightly, but like trauma. It's almost like the CrossFit has a way of forcing you to confront a lot of things about yourself in the moment that maybe isn't your best. Like you confront failure quite a bit. And for a lot of people, failure is a significant trauma for them. They have a hard time coping with that. And I think what helped me as a coach back then was my ability to help people work through those elements and be able to like guide them through that process to the other side of whether it's a workout or a training cycle or a training block or a training year, and then come on the other side and be able to acknowledge like the kind of crucible that they went through and ultimately why and how they were becoming better. But the other thing I should note is that switching course and like starting that gym also introduced me to my future wife. So if there was nothing else that came out of that, like That is a win in my book, because I was coaching her younger brother at the time. Her younger brother's a year younger than my brother, and they're both playing football at my alma mater. And I was also coaching at the school as well. And during the summertime, a handful of the kids would come and train with me. And she was a collegiate softball player, and so she had her off-season program, and she came back and started training there. And we were just friends at the time, but reconnected later on. But that introduction happened through our affiliate.
That's awesome.
So let's shift gears here for a minute, unless you have something else you want to ask.
I was just gonna kind of round that out and just say it's there's something to be said about life experiences, and I think the point that you brought up about how betting on yourself, you had to do that a second time, and we're gonna get into that, but just that first experience of betting on yourself, you do everything you do once, the second time is always a little bit easier, I guess. Maybe not easier, but it's more able to accept it. So I'm very interested to just kind of hear your mentality going from CrossFit Inc. into the podcast world and everything, but we'll get to that point. Transition.
Well, luckily, that's what we're going to transfer over to.
Okay. Well, CrossFit Inc., right?
Well, no. What I was going to ask you is about how did you, so you're doing CrossFit, you're at the ranch and everything, you get your level 1 cert and all that kind of stuff. At what point did you see yourself, or did they ever approach you about doing the broadcast side of it?
Yep.
So I actually never. It was kind of, and this is where I'm kind of count my lucky stars, because I think I was more lucky than anything else. But my connection to the Castros meant that when things with CrossFit HQ being close by in Santa Cruz, and anytime the games or events were happening and people came into town, I had an opportunity to socialize and meet some of those people. At the same time, someone who worked for CrossFit at the time, his name's Russ Green, was from Monterey nearby and was training at my affiliate. We had a mutual friend who was also the owner of CrossFit Monterey, and that I just met through, local throwdowns and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And he was training with me in the evening times. And I get the chance to kind of talk shop, and I'm a sports nerd, I'm a comic book nerd, whatever you want to be, and kind of inherently baked into that is a little bit of analysis and stuff like that. So we water cooler talk, providing our opinions and things like that. I shared mine, and a few times I guess it must have impressed a few people, because an opportunity just to lend a hand in the media team came about in 2011, and it was a week before regionals started that year, and regionals were 5 weeks that year, and there were 17 regionals. I got a call from Rory McKernan basically saying, hey, your name's been tossed around as someone that might be ready and willing and able-bodied to help out around here. We need some help on the media team. We need some people that are quick on their feet, eager to help and pitch in any way possible, and know the sport really. And they're I've talked to you. Your name has popped up a couple times from recommendations of people who have interacted with you. So, would you be interested?
Did you know Rory at the time?
Nope.
Wow.
I didn't.
That's awesome.
It's funny. Me and Rory, Rory's one of my great friends. I was literally on the phone with him a couple of days ago, and he's a brother to me. But it was so funny. We had such an interesting start to our relationship, because I said yes. I'm immediately on a plane flight 4 days later to Jacksonville, Florida, for the Dirty South Regional in 2011, and then I'm on the road for basically 5 weeks. I come back for a couple days at a time, check in with the gym. Everything was covered. Kenny was like, yeah, go for it. But at every stop along the way, CrossFit that year, because they were expanding the scope of what they were doing for regional coverage and things like that. It was the first year of the Open and, all sorts of stuff, expansion like crazy. They had hired a firm to basically handle all of their travel stuff. And for every trip that I took 5 weeks in a row, there was either a mix-up on my reservation for my rental car or my hotel. So I land, plane flights were fine. I land, and either they wouldn't have a rental car under my name or anything like that. So I'm like, oh, okay. And this is really kind of before Uber was a thing.
Right.
Or I'd show up to the hotel, and I'd show them my confirmation. They're like, we don't have anything. And so I'm trying. A lot of times I was part of the East Coast team, despite being on the West Coast.
I blame Michael Dalton.
Yeah. Yes. And so, okay. Yeah. And so I'm traveling east every time.
Right.
And so I'm getting in late and I'm having to call Rory, who's my point of contact, at like crazy hours in the morning. Like, I don't have a place to stay. I don't have a car. This is messed up. And it's funny, to this day, I remember the name of the person that was our travel like liaison for the other company. I'll keep her name out of it for,
Yeah.
out of courtesy, but that name is burned into my head because every time there was a mistake and Rory was just like, I swear to you, this is not how like this company runs. I swear to you, we have things wired better together than to leave you hanging on every single trip. And every week I would come back, bring all the stuff equipment I needed to bring home, because I was also like an equipment liaison, I guess. Basically a fancy word for like carrying gear. And I'd bring back hard drives and stuff, and I'd have to like hand it off to Rory, and he'd be like, "We're gonna get it right this time, man. You're gonna get on a plane. You're gonna have your car. You're gonna have your hotel, and you're gonna be good to go." And every time it wasn't. And finally I got back, and he like apologized profusely because, and his wife was, who's lovely. Angie was probably furious too, because she has this random guy calling their house where they got young kids on the at like midnight, 1 a.m. every week. But yeah, it was fun, and I got to work a part of the media team, and it was so raw then that they had people that didn't even know what CrossFit were hired as camera guys and editors and things like that. And so that's how my next job kind of evolved from there. Is I'm sitting there like talking shop with all the guys in there, and they have no clue what they're shooting. There was always a field producer there that was kind of responsible for dictating what was happening, and I would help him out, and I would help dictate that too, and be kind of like a associate field producer, not by title, but just by virtue of me being there and wanting to contribute. And so that's what my role ended up being the following year. So I helped out at the games. I think I helped out with volunteers that they just needed a warm body to fill that role and organize people. And then after that, there was a long break. I didn't hear anything from them. Didn't work for anything for CrossFit until the following season started. And then I got asked back to be a part of the regional team and actually come in a little bit earlier to help out with the update show. So I just kind of like kept getting wrapped into the fold, because apparently every time I did something, people were happy with what I did, and I just kind of kept saying yes. And my big break came when I was the only person that could operate the teleprompter properly. Because back then they actually used teleprompters, at least they thought they needed to. And it was a turn dial that controlled the speed.
Yeah, that way it doesn't go too fast.
Nobody could get the speed right with whoever was reading, and I was the only person that could match the speed with each person reading. So I got the call back each week. They're like, "Well, he's indispensable. We got to have this guy."
That's right, man. You got to have those steady hands.
and I've never been more thankful for like playing hours of video games with my brother.
Right.
Like having that level of control over like a digital device. It was. And eventually they were like, "Okay, so do you want to do anything else?" And like I would kind of like pitch a stat here or there, or an idea here and there, and like, Rory or Pat or Miranda or anybody that was on the show at that time would be like, "Oh yeah, that's good. I'll use that." And I was kind of like slowly like working my way into like kind of becoming, I guess, a producer or a stat producer, and eventually that evolved into them having me come on full time just to help out as someone who knew the sport, and I kind of started to take off from there.
Wow. Okay. So when did you get in front of the camera then?
So funny enough, 2012 regionals, we were down in Southern California. We had just finished competition, and we're doing post-game interviews with the qualifiers that year. And so it was Lindsay Valenzuela, Val Vobrel, Kristen Clever. I'm trying to think if anyone else. But so a producer there, Kathy Elder, was like, "Hey Tommy, why don't you go do the interviews? Like, why don't you just like, hey, I'm here with so and just do the interviews?" And the first interview I did was with Val Vobrel, who had just taken the year off to have her daughter. And it like the number one rule like in like sideline interviewing is like, don't. Like, your mic is yours and nobody takes your mic. Like, that is like the holy grail. And the first thing, what did I do? I let her baby grab the mic and pull it out of my hand, and she started eating it like an ice cream cone. And she was so cool and like diffused the situation. And then I finished up the interviews, and then I think that was kind of like, all right, maybe he's not ready yet type scenario.
Never work with kids and dogs.
Yes, exactly. And then 2 years later in 2014, there was a change in power on the media team. So the media director left, Tony Budding left, and a producer for the update show who had started working with us a year prior had been lobbying for me to do on-camera work. He was like, Tommy's writing a bunch of the stats and points and stuff like that for a lot of these people and helping them out. He's feeding storylines and pitching all this great content idea. Like, why not let him produce it? Like, why not let him say it? Like, he's like ran an affiliate. He trained at he's trained at the ranch. He knows the Castros. Like, people are starting to know him in the community behind the scenes. And when he pitches it, he says it in a way that's somewhat eloquent. So why not give him a shot to add another person on our bench? And when that had gotten shot down in the past, but when the power shifted and there was an opportunity, Charlie gave me a crack at it to basically do a first leaderboard segment and talk through some predictive stats stuff. And I was rough, obviously, and was learning, but there was enough there for them to think like, hey, let's keep working with them and let's keep building this skill with him. And eventually I got to keep doing more and more work. And then that turned into being kind of I guess I would say a core member of our studio and live broadcast production.
Wow, that's incredible. So I'll tell you this, I'm a physical therapist, that's what I do. I'm a physical therapist. We're in my clinic right now. And
awesome.
I'm not a public speaker. I have no background in podcasting, but me and Kevin, or actually my original co-host, we decided to start this podcast for just the local upstate CrossFit community since we're so involved in it. And I remember my first time just being behind a mic in a recording for a podcast, how nervous I was. I mean, it was unbelievable. I can't even imagine how nervous you were being in front of the camera. Talk about that.
So I believe the first segment, I was wearing a purple button-down shirt from Men's Express.
Yes.
And at the time, since it was my first time, I basically brought my own stuff in. But the studio team typically had got some sort of wardrobe budget, so like some polos or whatever, before we ended up basically getting a sponsorship from like Mizzen and Main, who provided all our stuff. And I remember being done and looking down, and I was like, could you see that the whole time? And I'd like sweated through the back of my shirt. And like
Express shirts were known for that.
I was so uncomfortable that like thankfully I had like pinned my elbows to my side so you couldn't see like the pit stains and everything like that. And Sean's like, no, you look great, you can see it. And I like turned to Sean, I was like, could you see this on camera? And he goes, we couldn't see it. The camera's like, you couldn't see it. I'm like, oh, thank God. I just like got down. I was like, how am I gonna do this? Like, I felt like, honestly, like the joke, I felt like Ricky Bobby giving the interview. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I couldn't speak the right volume. Like, I didn't know what to do, but they're like, trust me, you did all right. Like, and Pat Sherwood and Rory and them and Sean were really helpful in giving me feedback and helping me along with those things. And even like, hey, if you want to go do practice takes, like practice segments, stuff like that, like, let's do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome how they were molding you like that. That's really cool.
100%. I owe a lot to those guys, and then like I'm super, super thankful for their support.
Well, my degree is in radio and TV broadcasting, and I do photography. So
you have a radio voice, though.
Yeah. So
it's funny. I remember I was listening to like our first maybe 2 or 3 podcasts, and I swear my voice is like an octave higher than what my normal voice is because I was so nervous.
Yeah.
It's just getting used to hearing yourself talk is what it really is.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. And try being next to Sean Woodland, who like
the most sultry voice of all time.
He's just got like, it's like a mixture of Fergie and Jesus, and he just like brings it every single time. And I'm like, well, man, next to him, I sound like a chump.
Dude, I love quick break here. I love on your podcast all the movie quotes that you bring to the table. It's unbelievable how many movie quotes you bring to the table, and they're always so perfect. Are those planned, or are those like just on a whim?
Yeah, I think so. all of my closest friends, I don't know why, but we're like that.
Yeah.
It's just like
No, it's true. I almost think it's like almost our generation because we grew up on those 90s movies. We didn't really have Netflix or anything like that. So you repeatedly watch these movies or like early 2000s. And sometimes like when I'll watch those movies again, I'll be like, oh, yeah, that's why I say that all the time. Like I don't even remember that that's a quote from a movie. But yeah, yours are on point. Like every time, I'm like, wow, where did he pull that from?
When all you have is like the Happy Gilmore Billy Madison 2-pack seat.
Right,
DVD,
exactly.
You watch it a lot in your college dorm room.
Absolutely. Hey guys, we're going to take a break to thank our sponsors for today's episode. We're going to start off with CrossFit Greer. If you're living in the Greer area and are interested in getting started in CrossFit, go ahead and look up CrossFit Greer. Jen and Reagan Green are the owners there. If you mention the Apogee Podcast to them, they will give you 10% off your first month's membership fees.
I would also like to thank Blitz Belts and Chris Kane for their continued support of the show. So be sure to use their 15% off coupon code at checkout. That's Apogee, all caps. That gets you, the listener, 15% off at checkout at Blitz Belts on your custom order. I want to thank GoTape for being our new sponsor. GoTape has committed its brand to providing the best in athletic tape. They are the standard for CrossFit tape, scary sticky. Now they are providing the best in KT tape. So at checkout, be sure to get your 25% off your wholesale purchase. Use the coupon code Apogee at checkout.
Finally, if you guys would like to become an invested friend of the show and are interested in supporting the show directly, go to anchor.fm/Apogee Podcast and click on the support tab. We love bringing you guys awesome content each week, so be sure to subscribe to the podcast, drop a review, and let us know how we're doing.
So let me ask you this. So, you're in the podcast world or just in sports analysis in general, you can always have somebody talk about an athlete. Like they can say this athlete and I don't see where they're going or I don't know where they're getting to and maybe they should hang it up. So in the sport of CrossFit, we're beginning to see that turnover a little bit. The newer generations coming in. Some of the people that are there now, that are prominent names, are beginning to age out. But in our realm, it's a kind of a close-knit group, like everybody knows everybody. How did you overcome the idea of being able to talk about athletes and not hurt their feeling or just not make it personal between you guys?
Well, first, it's like Sean and I always say, it's always performance, not people. That is the one thing that we're bringing to the table when it comes to actual analysis of the sport, is that we're not judging their character and who they are as people. We're judging solely their performance, and we come from a perspective where like you can't fudge those numbers, especially in the sport of CrossFit, right? Because the standing on the leaderboard is so final, and it's not like football or basketball or baseball where I look at it this way. This was kind of unique about the sport. You think about how many times a CrossFit athlete takes the field of play in a season, right? In competition, 3 times,
right?
4 times,
right?
And versus 160 plus in baseball, 17 now in football. That's going to take some getting used to,
right?
82 games in basketball, and so it's very easy to like muddle the picture with a bunch of different performances across the board. Whereas if we focus primarily on the leaderboard and on the stats and on the results, it's pretty clear cut. And every time I try to, at least when we talk to athletes, a lot of times we're getting to sing their praises and we get to talk to them and say how phenomenal they are. And I would say more than almost any sport, CrossFit generally has a positive bias towards the discussion and the analysis that goes on in the sport. And part of that is just because I think in general we take a generally positive mindset towards everything we do in the affiliate, right? Even if you fail, it's like, hey, you're getting better, right? So there's a spin on it that makes it positive. But at the same time, when I talk to an athlete, I'm like, hey, how's it going? Like, I'm going to talk, want to talk about this performance that was really good. Oh, by the way, like, if you bomb, like I'll kind of preface it too. Like, hey, if you bomb an event or, something bad happens, we're going to talk about that too, but know that It's nothing personal, and there's kind of like this massaging process you go through where
Sure.
athletes learn to trust you, and they know you have their best interest at heart, and ultimately I don't want to be talking about their bad performances. They and over time they learn that, like, if I had it my way, I would only be talking about how well they perform.
Right.
And sometimes a bad performance in CrossFit on the leaderboard is still an excellent performance personally for them. So I think that also kind of paints the general, like, positive narrative as well in the sport. So it's kind of like a weird fine line for me. I don't think there's any necessarily one, like, system, because I think the way Sean handles it might be a little bit different for me and versus a few other people. And overall, I think the next evolution of the sport will be athletes getting used to more negative feedback, I guess, because I think the sport is still young in that regard.
I think one of the reasons why it's easier, I mean, CrossFit, like you said, is such a young sport that, you don't really have, I mean, you do, but it's not like you have Rich Froning, doing analysis of an athlete, or you have, Jason Kalipa's, doing an analysis. And so they can talk from their firsthand experience. Whereas, me and David, we've never been to the games. We've never been to regionals. The farthest we've ever been to is our friend times. So I mean, we don't have that. We don't have the mindset or the experience to know what they're going through. We can only read it from ourselves looking in. So it's kind of hard to, like, you want to say, well, hey, what's going on with you here? Your deadlifter is not that great, or you're not improving. Is it? Those are the kind of things, like you said. Those are the things that are going to be taken up. And I just, I think that would make it interesting. I mean, it's going to have to happen sooner or later, because sometimes those conversations have to happen. So it's just,
sure.
It's just, I wanted to get your take on how you obviously, like, I mean, like Rich Froning, for example, if you ever said anything, has he ever come back to you and said, hey, you shouldn't have said this, or kind of ribbed you, or just kind of sort of?
Well, I don't think athletes have ever necessarily ribbed me, but I think other athletes have provided their perspective on the matter. Say a performance where, maybe we hop on and be like, yeah, man, like I expected so and so to do better on this than maybe they ended up doing, and here's why, and here's some things that I saw and observed. And that athlete might hit me up and be like, yo, I heard what you said, like, this is my perspective on it. This is why I think differently than that. And I'm always receptive to that. I'm always like, the athletes always know that they can come and talk to me. And a lot of times, if I have to be heavily critical about something, I will go talk to them about it. I'll get their perspective on it. Sometimes they don't want to talk, and that's fine, because I get it. It's a sore spot for them. And sometimes they do. But in the very least, I'll get their perspective from it. And sometimes I carry a bias or a slightly skewed perspective, and sometimes they do too. So I think there's also that balance there. Like a great example is of what I think makes CrossFit so unique. You go to the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge this past year. Haley Adams, first event, finishes 9th. For someone that you expect to, like, maybe be on the podium this year, like finishing 9th in an event to start the weekend at a regional competition, for a lot of people is like, you look at the leaderboard, you're like, that's not great. I mean, it's all right. You kept it between the buoys. But for her, she'd probably circle that as her best performance of the weekend, because for pretty much one of the first times ever, she snatched 185 pounds in competition.
Right.
And it's like, that would be a 16th or a 17th. So context is always important.
Right.
And I try to provide context in my explanation of that as well. So just as sometimes that personal experience can paint a different direction for me, my context for the big picture beyond what just the athlete is seeing in that competition can also provide a perspective for them. So I think there's that natural dance that goes back and forth. But that's not to say that, like, I get it right all the time, or I don't miss something, or I provide an opinion or some analysis, and then I get that other perspective from the athlete, and then I end up changing, and I'll publicly say it, hey, like, upon further inspection, I was wrong about this. So I think part of it too is just being open to, like, if I'm going to be analyzing and providing an opinion on something for athletes, I have to be open to that coming the other direction.
The MAC was stacked this year. I was there too. So, Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was stacked. It really was this year. It was really good to see it. It was the first event where everybody got to be live and in person again. So, I mean, there's a lot of good things. Obviously, Jason Hopper came out of there, blew everybody away, didn't know who he was. So
It was epic.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was funny because we had Sean on prior to that, and we had told him, we were
kept telling him
hey,
the whole time, hey,
there's this dude coming.
we got a guy coming.
He's coming. It was pretty cool, man, to see it actually happen.
You know, it's funny because he like, you know, we all have our blind spots, right? We all have our spots. We're like, oh man, I thought I the signs were there, and it's funny because he kept coming. He's like, dude, I'm getting all this heat about Jason Hopper,
Yeah.
and I'm like, and I'm looking at him like, me and Brian Friend were both like, you know, I think this guy might be like the sleeper, like he just kind of like slipped between all of like the perfect storm of like cracks to like not have the opportunity to show us how fit he was beforehand. And it's possible. Like I think it happened the year before with Sam Quant too, with how like how he broke through to the final five. But and Sean, as soon as that happened, Sean's like, God, people were telling me, and
I should put some
like
money on it.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. So,
he trains at CrossFit Simpsonville.
Yeah.
And he also trains at Crash, which is run by J.R. Howell, who is in the Masters, the Elite Men's or whatever.
Yeah, he got 8th this year.
Yeah, he got 8th. And he basically, what they do is in the fall, they're going to do the second one this year. It's called the Crash Crucible or whatever. And they basically get, they get high-level, mid-tier CrossFit athletes that come up. We had Mark Hutchinson. We had Kyle Brewer. We had Hudson.
Did Taylor
Fricke.
Self go to that last year?
Taylor Self. Yep.
Was it?
Mitch Wagner was there. Josh Miller from back in the day competed last year.
Did Josh Miller used to be part of Crash?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where I train too. So it's there's a lot of talent coming from this area. I'll give you some more tips if you want to bet some money next year. But we'll give you some tips at the end. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about CrossFit Inc. and all those wild stories we hear from you guys about throwing down at HQ with Heber and Mars and Pat and all those workouts. So Pat Sherwood would program these insane workouts. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Was this like a daily thing that did you guys have like a leaderboard between you?
Pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of us follow what would eventually become linchpin programming. We also did some stuff back in the day, like when we were training. If we had friends that were training for regionals or for the games back in the day, then we would like follow their training to support them. But Pat Sherwood used to love he uses as his guinea pigs for programming. He's got such a great mind for like classic CrossFit programming, just like the simple, beautiful, elegant programming. And it's awesome to see like what he's built linchpin into. But back then when he was first getting it going, he had this yellow notepad, right? Full like letter size notepad that he would just scribble and write workouts on it that would just come into his head. I mean, pages and pages of workouts that didn't have anywhere to go or live or anything like that. And I think that was kind of the impetus at the time for linchpin. But then he would start to program these ones for us because we had a lot of somewhat closely talented people fitness-wise that had been in it a while. We could do a lot of the skills, but we were always kind of John, like guys will do, kind of like, hey, beat our chest like I got you last week. And, and Pat's like, hey, let's find out who's who in the zoo every Monday. I'm going to build a competition workout, 3 parts, 2 parts, something stout every Monday that you're going to come off a rest day on Sunday and you're going to tackle it, and it's going to set the tone for the week for you guys. And it was, me, Marston, Heber, Julian, who does other graphics and all the Buttery Bros videos. We have a video producer at the time, John Glancy. Sean would hop in from time to time. Charlie Doobie, who's a producer that produced the Update Show, would hop in with us. We would have people join for a week. People were in town that would join for a week, like Dan Bailey would do it with us.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it would just be like this, hey, Monday, and he started calling it the Monster Mash. And it's like the Monday Monster Mash, and we're going to do it. It's like 3 workouts back to back or 2 longer workouts back to back. And that was like bragging rights for the week. and it eventually has become a cornerstone of his programming. It's something that he does for his crew. But it was so much fun because like we didn't have like a hardcore affiliate running out of HQ. It was more for like an affiliate for the employees,
Mm-hmm.
but like that was like our little piece of community. That
Yeah.
was like what we rallied around and supported each other and trained with and put the sweat equity for, as far as like building relationships internally for the business, for CrossFit, and for the teams that we worked on within the company. And we would look forward to those Mondays, and some of the worst and best workouts I've ever had came on those Mondays. And like we pushed each other way more. I learned so much, and I got so much more fit from those days than I would have otherwise. And it was awesome.
That's awesome. That's what you want to hear, especially, for any business, a collaborative, getting together, working hard, doing a workout. Like, that's awesome. But even better coming from a place like CrossFit HQ, where CrossFit is CrossFit and you guys are doing CrossFit. So that's super cool to hear. And obviously getting super tight with what I would call probably your brothers there, right? And then having to be dismissed would probably make it even harder, right? So talk a little bit about that transition for you from being such a tight-knit group, and then all of a sudden it's like this big breakup.
Yeah, it's it's we were definitely a family, that's for sure. And there were times working for CrossFit because, and I'll say that, I'll preface this by saying our media office and the people that we worked in that office with, the people that were there on a daily basis, we were largely isolated and kept in our own silo from some of the other areas of the company, and particularly some of the areas that were problematic.
Mm-hmm.
So we almost kind of like, because we were in Scotts Valley, we were kind of like in this little like mountain office. And there was an office down in San Diego. There was like other weird satellite offices wherever like, Greg was and stuff like that. But we kind of like largely had our own like pod of family. Like we were all like somewhat like-minded. We all worked really hard. We were primarily focused around media. And it definitely felt like one of those things where like I'd wake up and almost kind of like pinch myself from time to time, because like I loved to go to work. I was excited to go to work. I was eager to go to work. And I truly felt like I could have done that the rest of my life.
Right. Yep.
I felt like the sentiment around the office is like, we're retiring here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was preached amongst the ranks, and that was discussed. It was like, hey, I looked left and right, and it was the exact opposite of the feeling. Kind of bring this full circle. The feeling I got when I decided to switch majors away from pre-med, the feeling that I got in that organic chemistry class was the polar opposite of what I felt when I was, 12 hours into a 15-hour day during regionals, and at the desk for like the 10th time that day. Like instead of like looking around and being like, what am I doing here? Like I would look around and be emboldened by the people that I saw and the work that we were doing. And it just made me want to work harder and do more. And so with that, having gained that much from the experience, man, all of that was also quote unquote lost, I guess, to an extent when we were shown the door. And there was definitely a sense of sadness and loss around something that I realized that like, we're probably not going to get this again.
Mm-hmm.
Like we may get something similar, and it may be a variation, and we may get some of it back, or we maybe end up doing this again, but it'll never be like this again.
Yeah.
There's like this era of what we had, and skateboarding around the office and having dogs run around everywhere, and everybody like, working at a similar frequency. We just probably won't get that, and very few people get that to begin with. So there was the sadness, and then there was a lot of work to be done to follow that cliche and be like, don't be sad because it's over, be happy that it happened.
Right.
And so that I think was the growth point of how we were able to kind of turn that around into something beneficial. But it was definitely like a piece of your life, like as far as an era was concerned, was being pulled away from you, or ended prematurely, because it wasn't ended on our terms.
Right.
I think from a media standpoint, as I see it, I think in hindsight, I mean, obviously you guys were the face of CrossFit in a roundabout way. You would tune in, you'd have the open announcements, you'd have the shows you guys did and stuff. So you guys were clicking along and doing all that kind of stuff. And then one day you wake up and you get a phone call and you're like, hey, did you read what happened? They're gone, because I know Michael Dalton. And so I was texting him about it and he's like, yeah, and he's like, he didn't say much about it because he obviously was one of the last ones to be gone. But I mean, it's just, to me, I think in hindsight, it has affected CrossFit a lot more than people actually think, because it's not that cohesion to me doesn't seem like it's there in some respects anymore. It's like, because you guys mentioned on the podcast when you guys started out, they said, hey, there was money left on the table, CBS and all those guys were coming in, and now you have all these offshoots, like you said, you've got the Buttery Boys that are doing their thing, which is great, and then you guys are doing your own thing. So it's like you guys are all cobbling it back together, but you're doing it not as a team as you did before. You're just kind of sort of, we're going to do our podcast, they're going to do their videos, and then somebody in the middle is going to come in and do the HQ stuff. And it's just going to be a skeleton crew. And from my standpoint, that's how I see it. I think it affected CrossFit more than they thought when they did it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think will ultimately be lost to time is how close we were on the precipice of doing something that was astronomically bigger and better than what we were. We talk about all the time that we were on the launch pad, right? We had the deals that we wanted and the coverage that we wanted, and we had the momentum that we wanted, and all of these things that we had worked for 7-8 years were there. And ultimately it wasn't meant to be, and I trust that. And I think there was a lot lost with that, which I think not knowing that would paint a lot of people's idea around that decision and that time frame that followed a little bit differently. But it's tough. I go back and forth because I do look at my life now, and I love my life, and I love what me and Sean have been able to build together, what Marcin and Heber have been able to build together, what Rory's been able to build with the Mayhem crew, what all of our friends have been able to independently do, and maybe that's what we needed. Maybe we needed a kick in the pants to get our fair market value, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was some, scary moments there in terms of all right, well, am I going to be all right? Do I got to move out of my house? Do I got to move back home with the parents? Do I got to how do I position this? Do I have to start all the way over again? And I think there was a healthy bit of challenge in that time frame that forced some growth for us and forced some creativity. And sometimes creativity out of necessity has a certain potency to it that I think
I agree.
is hard to find elsewhere. And it's you talk about that hunger, that hustle that comes from that situation. It's hard to. I always go back to the was it Evander Holyfield? I think the quote is about. It's it's hard to it's hard to get out of bed at 6 a.m. to run when you're sleeping in satin sheets.
Yes.
Yep.
And I do think there's something to that, but I think that also forced a certain level of creativity and and growth for all of us at that time that has benefited us now. And there's certainly some things that I think we can improve upon and keep growing and keep pushing forward and keep supporting it. But I gotta look at it this way, me and Sean, Rory, Marcin, we're all still involved in the community.
Oh yeah.
We're all essentially doing some of the things that we were before. We're all doing. We do have the opportunity to do some things on our own terms. We have built some things that are uniquely ours now. And at the same time, we've been able to feed our families and take care of ourselves in a way that maybe wouldn't have been possible if we had just stayed that course. I mean, it's hard to say, because we're speculating. But at the same time, it's man, I think there was something bigger that the community could have really enjoyed had that not happened. But at the same time, seeing how things played out,
right,
it was possible that maybe a blow up like that was just inevitable.
Yep.
I've always made the comment that CrossFit has basically made a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it's just the thing. knowing the volatility of the scenario at the top and seeing how it's played out since, like, you spend enough, you play enough with C4, you're gonna, blow up.
You're gonna blow up. Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna happen, and so maybe it was better that it happened then, and we were all positioned the way that we were when the top finally blew up, and now we've been able to be contributors to this new era and this new position, and all the new stuff that's going on with Eric and the new team there and all the stuff that they're doing, and maybe that it was in the end it's something that was whatever intelligent design and creative design you want to throw at it. Like, maybe that's just how it was supposed to play out, so we could be there for that when things eventually settled.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I think it's those years of being at CrossFit were kind of molding you to become a leader in the community, and when you're that dog backed in the corner, you can either fight or flight. Like, you were prepared to fight and create something, like you just said, that I think is even almost more beneficial to, like, that podcast. I'm not even gonna presume to know how many listenerships you have to each episode, but I'd venture to say it's pretty high, and I think it's very cool that you guys were able to bring that to the table on a weekly basis. Where I remember back in the day, we were scrounging for pieces and bits, like, all right, where can I find something on YouTube to watch? Where can I find something on the airwaves to listen to kind of know what's going on in this off season? And you guys have brought that to the table, to the community, and I think it's been amazing from a podcast sentiment, also to the Buttery Bros and the videos that they do. I mean, it's really incredible.
Well, Sean said it was your idea to do the podcast.
So talk about that. So I want to know this. Was it a hard sell to Sean, or was he like all in right away?
It was. I wouldn't say it was a hard sell, but I wouldn't say that he was in right away. I pitched a podcast at CrossFit multiple times from 2013 on, and was shot down multiple times, and it was just like, and if I'm being fair, look, I didn't have the clout to be able to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And multiple podcasts got started with people that had higher pull than me. And so when I got laid off, I got fired, 6 weeks before Sean. So I was October 15th. Sean's final day was December 1st. And so I had some time to ruminate on it and think about, like, what I wanted to do and what some sort of direction that I wanted to do. And one of the things that always stuck in my head is, like, man, I really want to do a podcast. Like, I like this format. I like in 2013, no one was doing podcasts.
Right.
It was still a very young platform, but I liked the way that it was. It very much felt like terrestrial radio, but just a little bit more free. And I, for the driver of that is, like, the conversations we would have behind the scenes, pre-production, building out a show for the update show amongst all of the personalities in the room were, like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and, like, record all of those and put them out, like, unedited, uncut, because, like, you have, like, now it was me, Sean, Rory, Pat. We would have athletes come by, Heber and Marston, all in this room, and people would be filtering in and out. Dane Bailey would be in town. He'd come by. If Rich or anyone else came by, like, was on an athlete visit and came by HQ, they'd pop in. Castro would pop in from time to time, and it's like we had all these people, and these discussions around sport and life, and formulating our analysis and opinions. And it was just, like, so raw and cool. And I couldn't get that out of my head. I'm like, I still want to do something that's polished enough to provide the news and discussion that we would normally do, but also just have a little bit more freedom to, in some ways, capture what was on the development floor of the update show. Mm-hmm. As far as, like, being a family show would allow us to an extent.
Right.
And so by the time Sean was getting down, I'm like, hey, man, I know I want to keep doing this. I know you got to feed your family. I know we got to figure something out. But I had already gotten reached out to by a couple of organizations. Morning Chalk Up had reached out to me. A couple of competitions had reached out to have me help out. And I'm like, I think this is a way that we can immediately dive in and have somewhat high quality without needing all of the overhead camera stuff like that. Because we had nothing,
Right.
And he goes, let me think about it. I don't know if Sean mentioned, I think he thought about joining the Fire Academy.
Yep, he said that.
I actually thought about at one point maybe joining the police academy back home. One of the things that has always been an issue is getting like persons of color on the Salinas police force to create a better relationship between what goes on. And so I considered that too. And I was thinking about all these things. I'm like, no, we're not done yet here. Like,
right.
We have some stuff that's we got to prove and we got to do. And so eventually, Sean's like, all right, let's get through the holidays. Let's think about it. Let me mull it over. So I went to Dubai. We had the holidays. Was planning on going to Wadapalooza, and finally Sean's like, let's just sit down and record something. I got my hands on some equipment. I reached out to some friends and figured out what was the way that we could record. And I'm like, let's just try it. Let's all get into a room. You, me, Marston Heber will be in Marston's kitchen counter. Let's just record something. And we called it the State of the CrossFit Games. And it was basically the first time we did it was like 2.5 hours of us just airing out all of our grievances. and there was like, there's no way this is going to see the light of day. Guys, I'm going to delete this. We're going to come back in a couple days. We're going to re-record this. We did it again. And I was like, that one's close. Let's take a break and let's do that one more time. And we came back that same day and did it. And I was like, okay, I think this is where we're at. Like we got all the energy out,
right,
and all the bad juju out.
You got some good vibes going.
Yeah, and then we started to turn the corner a little bit with that. And then that was the week leading into Wadapalooza, and we also recorded a preview of Wadapalooza. And then we were kind of off and running after that. I think Sean was like, yeah, actually, I kind of like this. I think we can do this, and it's not going to cost a whole lot, and we can see what the temperature is for this, and also work on other projects and give us some freedom, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Did you really delete the first episode?
I did.
Really? Man.
I can only imagine. No, I totally get it.
You guys
I was like, I don't want this to come out like 20 years down the line.
Right.
Where it's completely out of context and nobody remembers it anymore. And I'm like, that's the last thing I need is like some TMZ article coming out about like the uncut truth about the CrossFit.
Right. That's hilarious. So was the original idea to have Mars and Heber on the podcast, or were they just chilling with you guys at the time?
I think the original idea was to have me and Sean were going to be the drivers of it. We were going to be the kind of basis of it. But I think we were going to try and have them contribute and have them on and whenever they felt comfortable. I think they were still sorting out the what their role was too. Mm-hmm. So at the time, I think they were more open to it. Naturally, I think, obviously their talents lie in the filmmaking and storytelling process of that. And the idea for the vlog was starting to come around for them. And so there was this understanding like, hey, you guys can be as much or as little a part of it as you want. Mm-hmm. And we'll welcome you with open arms. It's like, hey, the porch light's always on kind of scenario. Yeah. You know where the key is. And that was just kind of like we gave that freedom, and we did some episodes with them here and there. We've had them on our anniversary episodes, and and then and then awesome. They developed their own thing, and off and running too.
I think it's great. I got one more question about the podcast, and then we'll move on. Who came up with the podium pick episodes? Whose idea was that?
Wait, say it again.
Whose idea was it to do the podium pick episodes?
The podium picks episode?
Yeah.
That was my idea.
That was your idea?
Yeah.
I love those episodes.
So we're gearing up. We're kind of recrafting our content strategy just because when we get into the season, it's so heavy that we can't produce that stuff as much.
Sure.
So we're gonna make like a window, almost like fall sports season style,
right?
Going up into when the season starts. We're gonna do like heavy with podium picks and like crazy things we saw and things like that. That I think is better suited for when people are looking for a break from like the constant sport time coverage. Right. So we got some good ones. We got Pat Vellner and Brent both coming on an episode together.
Oh, perfect.
And so it's going to be like USA versus Canada kind of podium pick
There you
style.
go. I love it.
We have Danny Spiegel coming on to do fall things, so we're going to put on our UGG boots and like
There you go.
days.
Yeah.
We're going to have Justin Medeiros on. We're torn because he wants to do breakfast cereals, and Sean really wants to do like famous mullets. Across history for podium picks. And so we're kind of figuring it out, but they're all three of them are going to be on in the next week or two.
I feel like you need to do cereals because we had this discussion in our clinic the other day, and the amount of cereals that were being tossed out were things that I hadn't thought of in like 20 years. I was like, oh yeah, I freaking love those things. And plus the mullet, like that was back in the 80s. He wasn't even around back then, so he probably doesn't know any famous people with mullets.
But they're going to figure out and do it for him. They're going to tell him.
I feel like the top of the cereal chain has been pretty constant for a while. You know,
I don't know. It was crazy. Like I said, there were some cereals thrown out that I hadn't even thought about. It was like, yes, that is maybe valid of top 5.
What is your top 5 cereals?
Right now, right off the bat.
What was that?
Give me your top 3 cereals
of all time. For me, any type of cereal outside of like Raisin Bran or Grape Nuts was a luxury because that's all we had in my house. So I'm not, but I would say like right now, Life is still very good. Golden Grams, very good. Maybe if I had to do, Cocoa Puffs for sure. Those are my top 3.
Your top 3.
You gotta have some sweet.
Yep.
I have an unpopular opinion. I think Cinnamon Toast. Everyone's just like Cinnamon Toast Crunch is the goat, like right away.
Sure.
I'm like, I think it's good. I think, and I got to go back and look at this. I think somewhere between like the late 2000s and early 2000s, late 1990s, the formula changed. something about the sugar cinnamon like started hitting different, and I just didn't like it. I liked it, but it wasn't like runaway for me.
Well, that was something that we talked about in the clinic the other day. It's like some of these really sugary ones would do a number on like the roof of your mouth, if you remember correctly, like Apple Jacks.
Yes.
And tear up your roof of your mouth. I couldn't stand that.
So mine would be. Go ahead. What would your top 3 be?
No, I want to hear yours. First.
Well, I'm a little bit older, but Dig 'em Smacks.
Dig 'em Smacks. I don't think I've
the very
ever
first
had
one.
Dig 'em Smacks.
Yeah,
that's the puff wheat. Sugar Smacks,
frog,
but it was
right?
Dig 'em Smacks. Yeah, it's a frog. Yeah.
Oh wow.
And then you have like Apple Jacks.
Sure.
And then I used to like Special K for some reason. It was just weird because it was like puffed rice.
Well, it
wasn't like Rice Krispie, but it was like Rice Krispie Flakes.
I had to have Wheaties in our house at all time just because of the boxes to see who was on the box that week or that month or however they did it.
But I mean, like, I don't like Fruit Loops anymore because Fruit Loops for a while just went crazy. They had giant Fruit Loops. They had little Fruit Loops. They had Fruit Loops you could buy at Hardee's through the drive-thru. Fruit Loop soda. I'm just like, Jesus.
There's so much conversation around cereal. I told you, man. It's got to be cereal. All right, what's yours?
I am. Let's see. Captain Crunch Berries. You want to talk about something that destroys the roof of your mouth?
Yeah, Captain Crunch.
Yes,
for sure.
That turns the roof of your mouth into Mad Max Fury Road. I mean, it's like it crushes it. But it's like that's like my fire walk. Like I gotta earn that.
You gotta have some hard teeth for that.
I love Alphabets, and that is like my old timey cereal. It's my dad. My dad loves it. It's literally Frosted Cheerios, just in the shape of the letters. And we could only get them from the Army Commissary. It was the only place that sold them in our area. But something about like the frosted milk for me, like everyone talks about the cinnamon milk, like I'm a frosted milk guy.
There you go.
Like, I thought I could get all the benefit of the frosted milk from like Frosted Flakes, but have a better like crunch and consistency from the best, like what is it, the transport system, if you will, from the Alphabets. I loved Alphabets, so that's like my nostalgia pick. And then I usually leave one that's like flavor I keep a spot in my top 3 that's like a rotating, like, what have you done for me lately type thing. And right now it's Cheerios Oat Crunch.
Nice.
They have a cinnamon oat crunch one that's like basically like Cinnamon Toast Crunch with oats in it, and it holds its consistency way better. and it mixes phenomenal with other cereals too.
There you go.
So I got an international pick. So if you ever when you get Pat Vellner on there, ask him. This is my international pick. It's Shreddies. It's Canadian. It's called Shreddies. You can buy them on Amazon in America, but it's like a honey wheat kind of thing. But they're phenomenal.
Ooh,
they're phenomenal. If I can, I can buy them from Amazon, but it's like you can only eat them for so many times. But they're really good.
So, I like that. I like so it's Honey O's.
No, go ahead. You're saying Honey O's.
Honey O's is like something I didn't have a lot growing up in our area, but I got exposed to it later in life. And I think it was kind of like Shreddies, where I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I ate it like 10 boxes in a row. And then I got to all right, I got to cool down a little bit. It's very crushable.
To me, Shreddies is kind of like a healthier version, if you could say that about cereal, of like Graham Toast Crunch.
Yeah. What's it called? What is the one that's just graham crackers?
It's Graham Toast
Golden
Crunch.
Grams?
Golden Grams. Yeah, Golden Grams.
Golden Grams.
Yeah.
Love me some Golden Grams,
yeah,
too.
They're the best.
Yeah.
There's a ice cream place called Brewster's that's here in town, and they have Golden Graham ice cream.
I gotta go try
phenomenal.
that now. Jesus.
All right. Hey, I got a CrossFit question for you. So this is the year that Ricky Garrard can come back and participate in CrossFit, in the CrossFit season. What kind of impact do you think that's going to have, like, on the CrossFit competition world this year? If at all, if you have an opinion?
It'll certainly have an impact for sure, without a doubt. Ricky was very talented. I know obviously he made the podium and he popped, and we found out that his season was tainted. And it's interesting because I actually wrote an article about him before that year. I would do like a 10 to watch type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I think the exact terminology I used was there's a storm brewing down in Australia, and that storm's called Hurricane Ricky. And I said that with the initial intention of it being good, but not knowing whether it would be good or bad, just because I felt like some people's like, and this is not to get too woo-woo, like some people just mix things up. They get into the fray for, whether it's trash talking or performance, and they're just kind of like a Molotov cocktail into the room. Sure. And I got that energy from him, and the intensity that both him and his older brother Benny competed with at times. Mm-hmm. And I got the sense that maybe they didn't always rub people the right way all the time, but they were always very talented and they could compete really well. And obviously, like, Benny made it to the games, and so did Ricky. So for better or for worse, if they found their way to the games, it was going to create attention for it. And I'm a pro wrestling fan, a huge pro wrestling fan. And you cannot deny the dynamic and success equation that comes from a good heel. And you can't just have baby faces. And I think, like, if he plays this right, he could be a heel, like a natural heel in the sport, because of what's happened, and because of the fact that he got caught cheating, and because of the fact that, like, he had also, like, taken a spot on the podium from someone, and there's a lot of history behind that. And really, he's the first, like, major athlete to be suspended, serve that suspension, and be able to come back with still some prime years left. So if he generates that and leans into it a little bit, it could generate a lot of pop for the sport. And it may not be the redemption that he wants or needs, but it could be something that could be beneficial for him.
Do you think you guys will ever have him on the podcast prior to the Open?
We've talked about that. It's something we go back and forth on. There's an element of, there's so many people that have done things the right way that are deserving of that press and time, that maybe haven't had the same results that he did, although that result was tainted. Mm-hmm. So we go back and forth, for sure. Like, I wish we could give press and time to everyone, but we can't. It's just like, it's a pie in the sky type thing. But at the same time, he's also, like, if he comes back and just starts cleaning house, it would also, there's a level of, like, irresponsibleness of just being honest journalists about the situation where we have to cover it,
right?
Yeah.
And I on it, my position on that honestly changes from day to day.
Yeah.
Like, there's days where I'm like, yeah, we should have him on, Like we should, but there's also it's like there's no right answer. I think because some people will say like you shouldn't give him the platform, and you shouldn't give him. He hasn't earned that opportunity. But at the same time, there's also the part of me that's like wants to be empathetic and compassionate and be like, well, if what is the road to redemption then?
Right, exactly.
See how he does in his first competition.
Man, I tell you what, I think every story has a good villain, and I feel like if you guys had him on, that would be a very hot episode, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think it would be awesome. And not that he's a villain. Well, right now he is, but like you just said, maybe a villain that gets redemption and becomes a hero. I think
and
I'm excited
who's
for it.
Who's to say that he may not even want to come on?
Right.
You know?
Right.
I think he has it, and this is unconfirmed, but I believe he's hired a PR team.
Okay.
Or some people to help him out PR wise, which I think is smart too, because he's navigating some new territory, really, like a territory the sport really hasn't had to deal with so far.
I'm very interested to see or hear what other athletes think about his return.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just not something I feel like that's really been talked about lately. So I was actually just thinking of stuff, and that popped in my head today. And I was always a fan, and I just like his mentality, even though, maybe he was caught cheating, but I do hope that he comes back stronger than ever. I really think it's going to be an awesome story.
It's fascinating because like there's always like that weird. I always find it interesting how people, because look, we're all inherently flawed, right? We're all flawed human beings, and it's always interesting to see how and where we weight certain flaws. And his flaw was aired out very publicly, and his flaw, like one of his major flaws and mistakes, came with very dire consequences, right? And so I know I personally struggle with that. Like, what is the path to redemption, and how do we deal with that, and what does that look like? What does even redemption mean in this regard? So I think it's something we'll continue to investigate for sure, and consider in possibly having him on. Like I want to see him compete.
Yeah,
I would be lying if I didn't say I was excited to see what Ricky Garrard looks like taking the competition floor again. Because it's unfamiliar territory for the sport as a whole to be able to deal with this. It's crazy because like other sports, people serve drug suspensions all the time and come back and compete and stuff like that. But it's so new in CrossFit,
right?
And there's something that the line between community and sport gets blurred in that regard,
right?
When we make those judgments, so it'll be interesting to see how the community as a whole responds.
I think the word redemptive is a lot. I think in this day and age, it's a definition that a lot of people need to learn. We need to learn how to forgive and not say forget, but kind of learn from our mistakes, and we move on.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%. Yep. All right, I know we're getting close to kickoff, but I do want to ask you a few more questions if you have time. Do you have time?
Yeah.
All right. I want to get your opinion on how this CrossFit season went and where, if any changes were to be made, in your opinion, where would they go? And also, second part of the question, I asked Sean this too. How do you feel like, over the next 10, 15 years, CrossFit legitimately professionalizes athletes?
Well, kind of covered part of your last question. I think there's just time and commitment is what's needed. I think there's an element of this day and age leaning heavily towards instant gratification that maybe has some people put the cart before the horse in terms of the professionalization of the sport. In terms of like, I'm a professional athlete, I work really hard, that means I deserve to make a professional athlete's wage, and we let all of the other things weigh in on that without taking a hard look and be like, all right, what is the reality of this scenario? What are some of the hard and fast facts about the sport? How old is the sport?
Right.
What is the general interest of the sport? What are the numbers and metrics that ultimately dictate interest and salaries and things like that of the sport look like? What are the other, if we're going to model ourselves after the other sports to help dictate how athletes should be paid, well, what are the other areas of that sport are we ignoring that also make that possible? I think we have to, like, and I get caught up in this too. Emotionally, we want like, hey, some of these athletes are friends of mine, you know,
Right.
like a lot of them I consider friends, and like I want them to get paid like professional athletes. I see the work behind the scenes that they do that is at or above what other professional athletes do. But the reality is like sometimes we're just not far enough along in the development process to be able to maybe have it be that way. So in terms of now looking forward, like, all right, well, fans and people have to show up. Like that is a a non-negotiable. So the people that are clamoring that athletes deserve to be paid, well, you have to show up in a way that's observable and valuable and measurable. And I made the same challenge to the Masters athletes, that the Masters contingent that always clamor for more representation and more money. It's like, well, you have to put your money where your mouth is then.
Right.
Show up to live streams, watch videos, digest content, go to live events, support the brands that you love in the space and everything that pours money into the ecosystem in order to make this grow, because it is a dollars and cents equation at the end of the day. And so if you're going to do that, that allows things like the big TV deal that every other sport has, that drives a lot of the funding up front for that. You know, the NFL, every single NFL owner from the TV rights deals alone ends up in the black overall for the season before a single game is played. That means every ticket sale, every cent from concessions, every piece of souvenir that is purchased is all cream on top of that.
Right.
And that's not possible without the TV deal. That's not possible without some of the marketing and ad revenue deals that they sign. And so all of those things are like version 2.0, 3.0 of the sport, right? And our sport is still, I would even say, on version 0.5. You know, we haven't even finished that first real iteration. Maybe we are now, with the transference of power. So I think we have to start from a fan perspective, showing up and being invested fans in the sport, and committed fans of the sport in all of the measurable ways. I think there has to be a long-term commitment from CrossFit to invest in all of the ways, on all of the buckets that will ultimately support the sport. So finding ways to invest in the athletes, finding ways to invest in media, finding ways to engage the community in ways that we were doing before in 2018, that helped create the fervor and interest. I actually think we're heading in that direction. Everything I've seen behind the scenes from CrossFit seems to be moving in that direction. I've been fortunate to be a part of some of that. You know, they're back committed to creating media. They're back committed to covering the sport, to highlighting and producing content that will lift up these athletes as characters and personalities and people that will have them both respected and revered in the community. And then also doing outreach outside of our bubble to better, I would say, better foster a reputation of CrossFit in the sport in, outside of our immediate community. For so long, CrossFit was so standoffish as a brand and as a sport. It was like, kind of like, if you're not for us, well, then we're going to flip you the bird and get out of here. And it's like, I get that mindset in terms of at times having that us against the world mentality, but also at the same time, it's like, if our goal, like from a bigger picture standpoint, if the biggest bucket that's going to pour into the sport, that's going to pour into the athletes, going to pour into the ecosystem, is the adoption of the health and fitness methodology that serves all of this, that is the foundation for all of this, then we have to start treating this like something that is willing to extend olive branches and make sure that as many people as possible can benefit from this.
Let me ask
you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say the more people, and I don't think this is disputable, is that the more people that are walking around healthy, happy, with CrossFit as the means for them to achieve that, is only going to benefit everything else.
Right.
And if we continue to have this, oh, you don't agree with what we do, or initially scoff at CrossFit, well, we're going to say F you. If that's our instinct, then I just don't think that's a long-term viable strategy.
Right.
How do you, I guess here my question is, how do you bridge that gap becoming a professional sport and still being close to the community? Like, my example is, like, we're at the MAC and you get off of the competition floor and those athletes are walking around up on the concourse and, they're meeting Joe Six-Pack on the side, and they're taking photos and stuff. How do you still keep it that way? I mean, I used to do a podcast before when we had Jen Jones on there, and I remember I left that podcast thinking to myself, they have foisted upon certain athletes the idea that they are famous and professional and that they should be available 24/7 to anybody to talk to. And when in fact, all they wanted to do was just be healthy. They just happened to be good at it. And so they don't really know how to circumnavigate the foibles and the pitfalls of being famous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how do you still keep it kind of in a nutshell, and still be really big and professional at it?
Yeah, that's a tough question. In the end, I always end up coming back to the affiliates. That ends up being kind of like the core of everything for me. Like, what is that thing that keeps athletes grounded and ultimately allows them to, benefit from the elements of being somewhat famous and being like at the tip of the spear, while also making sure that they have perspective. I think for some of the best professional athletes, it's the community that they surround themselves. And the most immediate community in that regard for athletes in CrossFit specifically is their affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important for athletes to train at their affiliate gym. It's nice to have a special dedicated space for the competitors to train and prepare like professionals. But I do still think that like being a part of your local community in some regard in the foundational element that has helped build you to where you are is a big deal. I do think that's something that's unique to us. Like in other sports, like most of us get into CrossFit later in life just because that's the nature of how it is. So like our first exposure to it, our home gym per se is our home, like as an affiliate, right?
Right.
Like our home playing field growing up when we're first exposed to soccer or basketball is probably some recreational park and stuff like that like doesn't really build a sense of community on it outside of that age demographic. So I think there's something much bigger that kind of binds us together in the affiliate space. So CrossFit, I think, and the athletes need to continue to cultivate, one, that affiliate space is a legitimate community and a support system for athletes. And then two, like the athletes being aware that like, without the affiliate community that feeds the bigger CrossFit bucket,
Mm-hmm.
their profession doesn't exist as well. And I don't necessarily have like a clean answer for like how to best do that, but I do think that element of fostering that relationship is going to be important in the long run.
Yeah.
I got two stories that tag onto that. And one I saw firsthand. I was down at Terminus shooting some photos, and Emily Bridgers is there and everything, and we're doing photos and stuff. And then this lady, a new person comes walking in. And so Emily goes right over to her, introduces herself, and the lady's asking her about, what is CrossFit, what is this gym and everything. And Emily and I'm listening to her and Emily's telling her the whole thing. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, Emily Bridgers is one of the top athletes in CrossFit at that time, games athlete year after year after year. But yet here she is talking to the person off the street who wants to know more about it. It didn't phrase her one bit, and that's a great story I have about her. And then my coach at the time, Hudson Fricky, was telling me about he was with Elijah Muhammad, had a story. They were back at Wadapalooza, and Elijah said, yeah, he goes, my mom and I were at church, and so my mom told me to come over here, and she wanted to introduce me to somebody. And she says, this is my son, Elijah Muhammad. And she goes, he's a big sports person in what he does. And she goes, what do you do? And she goes, because I've never heard of you. He goes, and it kind of hit him in the face. And he just kind of said, I just exercise for time.
It's true, though, man. It's funny because I remember after the CrossFit Games, they end on Sunday. You go to work on Monday. And people are like, hey, what did you do this weekend? It's like, I was watching the CrossFit Games. This guy named Justin Menderos just became the fittest man on planet Earth. And they're like, first of all, half of them are like, what's CrossFit? And 100% of them had never even heard of Justin Menderos, And that's just we live in this bubble where we think that, this is a huge
Everybody
thing.
knows, but they don't.
They don't. The majority of people don't. So
that perspective like keeps you grounded, right?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
That's just generally good, life principles, I think. But it's also like that's the thing internally that like I don't know. To me, that's like the magic of CrossFit, right? Like we have that anchor, that affiliate community that's an anchor that ultimately like separates us from other sports. Like other sports don't really have to have the debate of like how do we properly blend the community from the sport, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, what's the community of pro football outside of the players that have it and then the schmucks like me that throw on a jersey. Like,
Right.
you know, like I'm not going and playing like flag football in the same place that, you know, Dak Prescott's hanging out in all the time. You know, it's like
Right.
that dynamic doesn't exist in other sports. So
You're not going to pay $20 to go try out for the team, you know?
yeah, hey, I mean, I'd be there if the Cowboys did that. But.
That would be awesome. All right, let's get into a little bit personal life real quick before we hang it up. Talk a little bit about, you said you met your fiance, Tiff, correct, Tiff, through CrossFit. Talk a little bit about that relationship and how you handle kind of being like a big media face. You are a big media face in the CrossFit bubble. How does she handle that? Does she handle that with grace and or does she throw it in your face a lot?
Both. I mean, like all of the above, I guess.
Big CrossFit dude.
It's still weird to me that like, I don't know, like it's weird to me that like of being like I guess a somewhat recognizable figure, because we just like we just talked about, like outside of the CrossFit community, like who the hell am I, right?
Right.
You know,
yeah.
like, I'm just a guy that's like, you know, likes to talk about fitness and pours my heart and passion into it. But it's interesting to see like Tiff react to that, because when she first met me, I was like this trainer and like affiliate guy, like owner that was like, you know, living at the gym and training 24/7 and coaching and all that stuff. And I was just like a guy from her hometown. We went to brother and sister high schools.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like she always sees me as that same guy, which
Right.
is good, and that's honestly who I am. Like
Yeah.
I'm not anything beyond that. And but it's always funny, like when someone's like, oh hey, like we're public, or at the games this year. She got to come to Madison for the first time, which was a trip, and she's like, you know, she totally embraced it. Like people are like, hey, can I have a photo? And she's like, oh yeah, I got you. Give me the phone, I got it.
That's awesome.
Like leaned into it.
Yeah.
And she thinks it's hilarious sometimes. You know, she's like, maybe I should take a photo of you at home and sell it to like TMZ or something like
There
that.
you go.
Like, why would they want that photo? Like, first off, you wouldn't get anything for it, and you just be like, she likes to like bust my chops.
Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
She's awesome about that, and I think that's there's a level of like silliness in our relationship that like I don't think we'll ever leave, and I think that's one of the like the solid pillars for us.
That's great. So when's you guys are not married yet. You still have the big day coming, correct? When's that happening?
So we're starting year 3 of our engagement. So we originally had a date in 2020 that got bumped. Obviously, the pandemic had our plans. We had a date this year that got bumped again. We are now switching venues. We're switching cities now. We were originally going to get married in Lake Tahoe. Unfortunately, there's a bunch of wildfires right now, a bunch of stuff going on. And I think generally the whole system there is just kind of overloaded. And we got to start making decisions because we're going to pick our date for 2022.
There you go.
And we're going to start moving forward there. So our goal is by the end of this month, have a date for 2022 and our venue picked out. So this weekend we're doing site visits. We're going to be last weekend. We were going to be up in Tahoe looking at venues, and that got canceled because of the wildfires. So that was kind of like the final, like we need to switch course a little bit.
Right.
And so now we're going to go visit 2 venues this weekend and hopefully have something locked down.
Awesome, dude. That's exciting.
Congratulations.
That's exciting. Yeah, congratulations. Married life. Fun times.
It is.
It's good. It's good, man.
I can't. I mean, we've basically been married, you know, the last kind of 2 years. But I'm just excited. There's something about that, you know, like that you know, like whether nowadays people see it as like a grand gesture or just a ceremonial procedure. Like I find value in those things.
100%.
And I find value in those displays and what it means to other people in the community that help put you to where you're at. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the party afterwards too.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like we all have big families, and we have, you know, me being 35. 35.
35. Dude, I just hit that like 2 days ago, so I feel you on that one.
Being 35, like I've had a couple a couple stages in life where I've built up friend groups and stuff like that, and people that I keep in touch with. So like we have a bigger family, so to speak, from friends too. So I'm excited to like have all those people in one place because you don't get that very often.
Right? Yeah, dude, that's special. That's awesome. All right, rapid fire questions.
Rapid fire
Let's do
questions.
it. All right, this is the time in the show where we just think of a question off the top of our head and you spit it back real fast.
Ooh, all right.
All right.
Go.
First question. True or false? Your favorite band is Swedish House Mafia.
Ooh, false, but close. I love Swedish House Mafia. They're probably my favorite DJ duo, a group of a trio. My favorite band is Foo Fighters.
Okay.
Very good. All right, so for most dudes, they are either clean shaved or they consistently have a beard. You are consistently both of them, right? Which is your preference? What do you like the best, the beard or the clean shave?
Ooh. I like 4 days of stubble.
Yes, okay, I can go with that. But you don't have much gray yet. It's coming. I can't believe you're 35. I'm 35. If I grow any type of beard out, it is completely gray on the chin and up through my jaw here.
I had 0 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Not a gray hair on my head or my chin, and I'm starting to get a nice patch here. I had a couple gray hairs pop in. That's why I keep the sides close.
Yeah. It was devastating, man. I had an awesome beard going on last year, and then it just got so gray. You see me now. I pretty much keep it clean.
Dude, I'm 48. How much gray do I have?
Well, you're just a genetic specimen.
Whatever.
All right, go for it.
True or false? At one point, you thought rodeo might be a career for you.
Ooh. False, because I did a couple rodeo events and immediately realized that I'm not cut out for it.
I saw that one photo on your Facebook with you and like 6 other guys trying to take down a calf, and I'm like, it took 6 guys, and he still got the best of you guys in the photo.
So my hometown, Salinas,
yeah.
The California Rodeo, which is like one of the biggest in the country, is in Salinas. It's like it's called Big Week. It's the week that it comes into town. PBR has a stop there, and they do a couple of events that you can sign up for, one of which is calf dressing. So you and 2 of your buddies have to take a pair of jean pants and catch a calf by the lead rope and put a pair of jeans on it. And they're about 500-600 pound calves, and then race to the finish line. And it's an event that's commonly done after a few frosty beverages, and then you go do it just to kind of take the edge off and so you don't like get nervous getting plowed by a calf. And so we did it like 4 or 5 years in a row, and me and a couple of my buddies from high school, we would do it. We had a blast, and our friends and family got to laugh at us, so that's always a good time too.
That's awesome.
All right, so there's this big boxing match that's coming between Josh Bridges and my mind's blank for a second.
Jacob Hepner.
And Jacob Hepner, yeah. If Jason Khalipa came up to you and said, "Yo, Tommy, you want to do a fight for prize money?" Would you do it?
100%.
That's
no
awesome.
question.
Great. We should make it happen, dude. Call your agent.
Dude,
I'd pay for it.
I'm a big fan of Jason. I would need some. Jason's actually a really good jiu-jitsu practitioner.
Sure.
I do it too, and he's actually better than me. So like that's I'm like, I know you can grapple, but if it's just striking, if it's just hands, I'll take all the smoke.
Let's do it, man. Make it happen.
Jesus. All right, your favorite number?
14.
14, like it.
14. Okay. We ask this one frequently. So Harrison, our producer here, gives you a prepaid black card, all expenses paid for a week vacation. You and Tiff are going to the airport right now. No COVID. Where would you be going?
A week, all expenses paid.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
There's no money cap. Black card.
Black card. Man, that's tough.
Yeah, it is.
Honestly, I don't think I would be the one making that decision.
Right.
I think
That's
Tiff
true.
would make that decision. I'm fortunate to have traveled everywhere, like a ton of places. maybe Iceland, maybe Greece, like Santorini.
That would be on
Something.
the top of my list for sure. I want to go to the Adriatic Sea real bad.
Yeah.
Croatia. It's like one of these new hot spots. I really want to go.
Yeah.
All right, my turn. So, you've made it to the games. All right, you're competing. It's the final WOD. And there's 3 other people. There's 2 other people with you. Who is to your left and who is to your right? It's for the podium. Who are those 2 athletes? Could be anybody.
Wait.
Past or present.
Could be anybody. Doesn't have to be an athlete. It could be, Sean Woodland. It could be anybody.
So I get to pick the 2 people I'm racing to the podium with.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the winner is obviously to be you, but you would be the fittest man in the world.
Okay. This is a good question. To my left. So how many people do I get to line up?
There's
3,
of
but you can take 5 if you need to.
Okay, 5. All right. So, to my right is Marston. To my left is Sean. Just beyond him is Heber. Then on the other side of Marston is Rory. And I'll throw Julian in there as well. As a little content creator race to the finish.
Oh man, that would be epic.
And what would the workout be?
It would be, let's say, okay, we'll do 5. We'll do 6 rounds for time. 6 rounds for time of 5 tap and go deadlifts at 405. They have to be tap and go. 150 double unders. And we'll say 7 muscle ups.
Oof.
Ring muscle ups.
You gotta have a pull up. Yeah, you gotta have some sort of pull. You're gonna destroy your
gymnastics,
destroy that posterior
monostructural,
chain.
weightlifting. You got all 3.
That's it.
All right.
And I'm the only one finishing that workout. By the way.
No doubt. Yeah, 405. That's good. Let's see. Do I have one more question? I don't think I have any more questions, but I do want to pitch something to you that you need to pitch to the Buttery Bros. You guys need to have those guys that you just mentioned, those 5 guys, 6 guys, however many it was. You need to have a bros weekend and document the whole thing for an episode.
All right.
You got to do it.
I'm all for it.
Got to do it. That would be an amazing episode.
So where can people find you on the SoCal Meds? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you there.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just thinking about all the weird and like crazy scenarios we would get into if we really got into it. Maybe like immersed ourselves somewhere, like went to Mexico.
Yeah.
Oof. We get into some trouble.
It'd be good. It'd be real good.
So where can people follow you at?
Social media on Instagram at Tommy Marquez. Just one word, my name, TOMMYMARQUEZ. Our podcast Talking Elite Fitness on Instagram. Those are the two main ways. If you like reading articles and you go to Morning Chalk Up, you can click my name on any article and it'll take you to my entire written history. So if you want to check out articles past and present, I've got a ton of leaderboard videos and stuff out now on CrossFit Games YouTube. So we're trying to be everywhere. Our podcast obviously has a YouTube at Talking Elite Fitness that we put out interviews and content on too. I think that's about it. I think that's the main
awesome.
one.
Well, dude, we really appreciate you taking the time on a Thursday afternoon to come on a podcast like ours, man. It means a lot. I know you probably have a bunch of people reaching out to you at all times, and I know you have your hands, like you just said, in a lot of different pots. So it means a lot for you to come out, and the upstate community is going to appreciate this episode a whole lot. And when I say upstate, the Greenville, South Carolina area. Hopefully we'll see you guys around here. Like I said, there's a lot of talent coming up, and we got Jason over here. So whenever you guys want to stop by and throw down, do it. We'll be here.
Epic. I fully plan on it. I really appreciate you guys having me on and the opportunity to chat and talk shop. I love doing this, and happy to spend these few hours with you guys.
Well, thank you very much for honor, man.
We appreciate it. All right, y'all heard it here.
Apogee Podcast.